This murder was one of the most horrific I ever covered as a reporter.
He had articulated that he could kill both of them.
He had always been a really nice kid.
This is a parent's true nightmare.
I had never seen anything so ugly, so evil, and so horrific.
He's still enraged, he's still upset. He wants to do some damage.
Even the devil himself would have been more merciful.
Yo, stop!
When kids are born to abusive parents, there's no way to predict how it will affect their future. Why are some of these kids able to move on and live good and productive lives, while others stray down a dark path? When does abuse and neglect lead a teenager to commit murder? The Schwartz family lives in a quiet suburb of Maryland. Bob Schwartz and his wife, Kay, are parents with strong religious values.
They were very involved in the Right to Life movement. They were very pro-life people.
Kay was an English teacher at the Broadneck High School. Bob was a computer technician.
They were very decent people. They were very kind. They were strong Catholics.
Unable to bear kids of their own, they adopt 3 foster children through a Catholic charity. Larry Schwartz is 6 years old when he is adopted. His life before that was filled with neglect and rejection.
Larry's early childhood was really a sad story. He goes through 4 different foster families. Each one rejects him for a different reason. In one foster family, the bedwetting drove the foster mother crazy. In another, the hoarding of food, constant overeating and putting food under the bed. In another, hyperactivity. He was extremely aggressive to the other children in the household. And in the 4th one, he was really very aggressive and frightened the mother. She got so mad at him that she twisted his arm behind his back and broke his arm.
Larry's many foster parents rejected him and sent him back to child services time and time again.
There was a series of losses that he had in that each time he moved foster homes, he lost the mother figure, the other children that were in the home with him.
And when he finally came to the Schwartzes and they adopted him, he told me in order to find some stability in his life, he basically set out to be the perfect child.
Larry was very mild-mannered and had a habit of internalizing his feelings.
He was never going to argue. He was never going to fight back. He was never going to have a temper tantrum. He had always been a really nice kid.
Anne is the Schwartz's youngest adopted child.
I was adopted like around 4. I am happy that they did adopt me because I wouldn't be here today.
Larry and Anne form an unbreakable bond.
He doted on her, he babysat her. Everybody who knew them said they were exceptionally close.
Annie and Larry were very close. Larry was Annie's protector.
Michael is the oldest brother.
Michael Schwartz was the saddest human being I have ever known. If you think Larry's childhood was sad, oh my gosh. Michael was in 7 foster homes in 7 years. He was beaten, brutalized, terrorized in many of them, and he responded in kind. Michael was the opposite personality of Larry.
Michael was a very disturbed young man. He was frightening. He was haunting.
Michael was angry, rebellious, acted out.
Probably had mental defects that probably went undiagnosed. A constant battle for them to try to rehabilitate and provide some therapy for, but I think he had a sociopath personality.
By adopting these 3 kids with broken pasts, Bob and Kay provide them the family they never had.
They were people who took these 3 children in and tried to give them a better world that they had not known up till that point in time.
To their community, Bob and Kay Schwartz are well-respected church-going parents.
At home, it was totally different. They would show one side to the community and their friends and especially to the church. But my dad and mother were really, really strict. I know that there was some kind of physical abuse. I would hear screaming and yelling because I would hide in my closet.
You're lucky we don't just send you back to the orphanage. I want you to fight. No!
Well, Bob Schwartz in particular was physically and verbally and emotionally abusive of both boys. Bob would punch Michael when Michael used foul language, which was often. He would beat him.
I know there were suggestions that they went over the line, if you will, on the discipline side of things. The fact they had a swimming pool in their backyard suggests to me it wasn't all a boot camp mentality at any level.
I know Bob and Kay meant well, but there should not be any physical abuse whatsoever.
Michael refuses to follow the family rules, which causes tension in the Schwartz home.
Even though he was acting out, he really wanted Bob and Kay Schwartz to love him like they seemed to love Larry.
Apparently, he had run into some juvenile problems. I think a break into a vacant house, and they were either sitting and smoking or drinking beer or something when they got caught. Parents decided that they couldn't control Michael and that they would return him to Department of Social Services.
Michael is thrown out of his adopted home and sent back to social services, the nightmare he was born into. With his older brother gone, now Larry becomes the focus of his parents' extreme discipline.
The dynamics in that family up until that point seemed to be very much Michael was the bad kid, Larry was the good kid. Now that Michael is gone, there is no, quote, bad kid. There is no role that's being filled there.
As he described it, he had gone from being the wonder child in the family to somebody who could do no right. They decided that they just hadn't been rigid enough with the first one, and they were going to redouble their efforts with the second one.
That's the case, then poor Larry is kind of stuck with having this kind of unrealistic set of expectations that he has to achieve and never being good enough.
Larry is not allowed to go anywhere except church and school, and he's forbidden from seeing friends.
He had been grounded because they found him drinking.
Larry holds back his anger and doesn't communicate his feelings. The frustration building inside of him becomes more than he can handle.
The punishments seemed not to fit. They seemed to be very extreme. It was a very confining, controlling atmosphere.
While Larry sits isolated at home, his brother Michael is locked up in a state clinic for mental illness.
Michael had articulated on numerous occasions that he wanted to or would or could kill both parents at some point in time.
Michael and Larry are raised by adoptive parents, Bob and Kay Schwartz. They're very strict, and the boys live in fear of constant discipline. They grow to resent their parents. With Michael kicked out of the house and committed to a mental hospital, the Schwartz's focus is solely on Larry.
He was not allowed to watch Superman because in the eyes of the parents, who were very, very Christian, very Catholic, that was a movie on the do not watch list. They had a pool at the home. They could use the pool but could not splash any of the water on the apron of the pool. And his parents said you can drive if you can bring a certain subject mark up to a B.
And midway through the semester, they changed the rules.
So he achieved the B, worked very hard, and his mother and father promptly said that it wasn't good enough. They thought that he should have an A before he got his driver's license.
This enraged him to have the rules changed.
Who are you talking to?
His parents were so worried that he would have sexual relations with girls and get a girl pregnant.
I think he was not given the freedom to date without restriction.
Ignoring his mother's rules that he mustn't date, Larry begins a secret relationship with a girl from school.
I'll get dinner, and then we'll go to the movies.
Larry went out with Sarah, who was a girl at school that was enamored of him.
It's actually kind of hot.
And after they went out, they went parking. That night, they had gone all the way, and it was Larry's first time.
Kay and Bob did not like this girlfriend, and they were going to keep a tight leash on the relationship. And I think he was a man who very much enjoyed his first sexual experience and thought, I'll be damned if somebody's going to tell me I'm not going to see this girl again.
Mrs. Schwartz had belittled Larry's girlfriend.
You're talking
Called her a slut.
Stop seeing that girl.
That was a triggering event that made him go into his room, poured some rum that he'd stolen from a neighbor.
Had a couple of drinks of rum. He went downstairs. His mother was watching TV in the family room downstairs.
He had actually snuck up behind her.
Stabbed her, I think it was 13 times in the throat. Kay's breathing sounded to him like a freight train, very loud. And that's why he was stabbing her in the throat, to try to stop the noise, because he was afraid it would wake up his sister.
And then she was dragged outside. She was stripped naked outside.
Took a axe maul and approached Kay from the rear and sliced open her skull.
Then came back in.
Bob heard the noise, came over, and Larry turned on him. There'd been some level of a struggle, and eventually a kitchen knife was used to inflict mortal wounds.
Bob was stabbed some considerable number of times, 20 or 30 times.
Larry had a serious psychotic break, and he went into an unimaginable rage.
Must have been so much adrenaline, it wasn't even a struggle.
They were basically slaughtered.
The morning after the murders, the police get an emergency call.
1014.
A male caller tells police, "I think my parents are dead."
The dispatcher said that the male caller sounded so calm, she didn't really think they could be dead. She said, "Well, what makes you think your parents are dead?" He said, "I looked outside, I saw my mom lying in the snow. I think she's dead."
When the paramedics arrived and they found the two children there, Larry and Annie, the paramedics said to Larry, "Where were you?" And he said he was sleeping the whole night. And they said, "You didn't hear all the gunfire?" And that's how bad the bodies had been desecrated and mutilated, because they thought they had been shot, that those were gun wounds, when in fact they were knife and axe maul wounds.
When police search the crime scene, they find Bob Schwartz lying dead in his office, and Kay Schwartz in the backyard, stark naked and covered in blood, with just one green sock left on her foot.
One of the detectives told me it was very bizarre how both parents had their legs spread very wide apart. It was not a natural way to fall in any way, shape, or form. It was obvious that the killer had pushed both parents' legs wide open, which of course suggested a sexual nature to the crime.
Bob and Kay were killed in as brutal and as horrific a fashion as I would be able to describe.
It was so horrible to see her lying naked there that one of the firefighters who arrived put a blanket over her, even though he had been trained and he knew as he did it he wasn't supposed to, but it was just so awful looking at her that he covered her up.
The police talk to Ann and Larry about what happened.
Have a seat.
Larry is calm and doesn't seem upset.
Larry just seemed very unemotional that his parents had been dead. This horrific event had occurred in his house, and he seemed rather matter-of-fact by it.
Everybody who talked to the children that day said that Larry was unemotional. He seemed detached. Fireman took him outside and said, "You know, it's okay if you cry." And he said, "My parents are dead, aren't they?" He said that he had just come in and found them. So the police asked him when they arrived, "Well, if you had come in and found them, where were you the night before?" He said, "Oh, I was here. I slept upstairs in my bedroom. I didn't go anywhere." First, he said, "I went into the dining room and looked out the window and saw Mom and called 911. Later, he said, "I went into the kitchen and looked out the window and saw Mom's body and called 911. At one point, he said he'd gone downstairs. At another point, he said he never went downstairs.
The detectives find Larry's explanation strange and inconsistent.
What I can recall is I heard a noise, but it woke me up. And I remember going down the stairs to our basement. To the right, we have another room. I guess it was my dad's computer room, and he was dead on the floor. I think I noticed that our sliding glass door was open. I walked over there and I saw blood. My mom was dead.
Police are suspicious of Larry, but can't link him to the crime until they find a bloody handprint on a sliding glass door.
Based on the match of the palm print, they got an arrest warrant to arrest Larry Schwartz for the crime of killing both his parents.
Under relentless pressure, Larry finally breaks down and confesses.
Larry confessed in the law library in my office.
Tell me what happened.
Larry told me everything that had happened.
I grabbed one of the kitchen knives.
He didn't hold back a thing.
And I came up behind her.
It was the most incredible meltdown of a human being I'd ever seen emotionally.
I was just so angry.
And just totally broke down.
I wanted to stop it.
Nobody suspected Larry. Nobody.
We filed a not guilty by reason of insanity defense. I remember asking him, I said, what were you thinking? And he said, I wasn't thinking.
He had an out-of-body experience, he said.
He describes being on the ceiling, seeing this happening.
It was like I was watching myself, and I couldn't stop it.
At the time of the murder, our experts felt that he was clearly having a psychotic episode. He wasn't responsible for anything he was doing at the point.
I believe he knew what he was doing, but I don't believe he had any control to actually stop what he did.
There were mortal, multiple wounds inflicted by Larry to both Bob and Kay that night, emanating from a seemingly tension between a parent and a child over grades, over a girlfriend. Two things that almost every teenager in the world has had tensions over, which often doesn't result in the type of horrific attack that these two people suffered that night.
Larry murdered his adoptive parents, and the details of the murder only raise more questions.
Well, it's interesting about Kay Schwartz being found naked because Larry told police he stripped off her jumpsuit to get rid of the fingerprints. But the fact that both parents' legs were spread-eagled really had sexual connotations.
There was evidence that he had violated her sexually with his fingers. That, in effect, is a little bit significant in the sense that she had emasculated him, and so this was really the physical acting out of that emasculation that he felt over the course of years. So he defiled her.
It's more evidence that this was a deeply, deeply disturbed young man who was sociopathic on the highest levels.
Nearly 30 years after the murder, youngest daughter Anne reveals her hidden thoughts on the real reason Larry murdered their parents.
He did it for me.
Larry Schwartz confesses to the murder of his adoptive parents. Almost 30 years after the murder, his sister Anne explains her reason why Larry killed.
He found out that my dad was sexually abusing me, and he's pretty sure that my mother knew, and she did nothing about it.
The fact that Annie somehow was abused, no basis in truth for that whatsoever.
The reason my brother did this was solely to save me.
But does sexual abuse justify murder? Not according to the law. Larry pleads guilty to second-degree murder and gets a light sentence. He gets out early for good behavior.
Larry got 12 years in prison and only served 9 for murdering 2 people.
The sentence that Larry received was extraordinarily soft, if you will.
I think the defense lawyers and the prosecutor and the judge and many of the people in Annapolis felt that he deserved leniency and that he just snapped one night. And they really believed it was a second-degree crime of passion and that he'd snapped.
When you consider there are young people who've done more than that for selling a couple ounces of crack cocaine, that sentence was a disparity that was a remarkable miscarriage.
Larry was granted leniency for the murder of his parents. His brother Michael is currently serving time for stabbing a man to death over a jar of coins. After his release from prison, Larry begins a new life in Florida with a chance at redemption.
Larry Larry got out of prison after 9 years and started anew. He fell in love with a woman 13 years his senior.
I met Larry through a mutual friend, family member.
And she took him into her life and made his life much better.
I had learned from his roommate that he had been in prison, and he told me it was for killing his parents. He didn't talk about it very much. Larry was a survivor. He had tremendous remorse, actually had love for those people. There was abuse situations that were not tolerable. All he ever wanted, really, was a normal life in a home and family. Larry was the most original, honest, compassionate, giving person I've ever known.
Larry was, I believe, a second semester senior in high school. He was theoretically about 4 months from being emancipated on any level. He could have walked out that door on high school graduation day, legally, ethically, morally. It's unclear why we couldn't have put up with each other for a few months and just survived until graduation and moved on.
People who call him evil, you can't do that. You can't judge somebody from the outside. And all those people who say that he's evil, shame on you, because you don't know him.
The story that emerged afterwards was really a story of redemption. December 29th, I walked into the house. The phone was ringing. I picked it up again. It was the sheriff's office in Florida notifying me as next of kin that Larry had had a heart attack that day at age 38 and died.
So the last 2 years before he died, I do believe Larry got some joy and happiness out of life.
My years with Larry were the happiest years of my life.
Despite the fact that he had some levels of popularity at a later point in his life, he was a very troubled young man who had some incredibly antisocial behaviors that he was not able to overcome.
He just was my knight in shining armor. I mean, I miss him dearly.
It's an unspeakable tragedy. And I do accept the fact that people can rehabilitate, and there is redemption, and there is an ability to move beyond horrific mistakes. I hope that is true.
Abused and neglected kids can grow up to do horrible things. But why is it that some kids have the ability to cope with the past, while other kids snap? What could possibly lead kids to kill other kids? In the harsh desert, 80 miles north of the city lights of Las Vegas, sits a small town of Mesquite, Nevada. Mesquite is a truck stop between Arizona, Utah, and Nevada. It's a place that very few call home. The only sights are its 3 casinos. If you're a grown-up in Mesquite, there's not much to do but get into trouble. And if you're a kid in a place like this, trouble sometimes finds you. Behind one of the casinos, there's a rundown trailer park where Brittany and Christiana Bergeron live.
These little girls were residents at this trailer park, and really a tragic situation.
Brittany Bergeron was 10 years old, and her little sister, Christiana, was 3 years old.
Christiana was definitely an angel. A little tiny, frail, 3-year-old girl, blonde hair, little girl that somebody would brag and say, "This is my baby girl."
We had a picture of her with a little lollipop and her little pigtails. Brittany was obviously a lot older than her stated age. She was responsible, she had good judgment, and she was truly little Christiana's surrogate mom.
Brittany Bergeron is such an amazing soul. She took care of Christiana. She felt responsible for her.
Brittany spends her days caring for little Christiana, while their mother, Tamara, spends her time gambling with her boyfriend and dealing crystal meth.
Tamara Bergeron was very well known to our narcotic unit. We had law enforcement contacts with her at that actual trailer. And when we went to the trailer, there was drug paraphernalia scattered throughout. The trailer was in a disarray. The children appeared to be unkept and uncared for. We had immediate concerns about the lifestyle she was leading at that time.
You think of 2 little girls living behind a white picket fence, playing with the children in the neighborhood, and that's not the type of upbringing that Brittany and little Christiana had.
They were born into a family that was dysfunctional, that was unfit. They were left for hours on end while Tamara and her boyfriend Robert gambled at the casino. In a matter of 2 weeks, she spent in excess of $18,000.
They had won some money gambling, and instead of investing in their family and their home and making sure their kids were safe, they elected to continue to gamble and use and sell narcotics.
I think the parents were out more than they should have been away from the kids, leaving the kids and going to the casino at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and gambling, and leaving these kids home alone. I think that wasn't the first time they'd ever left these kids alone.
But Brittany and Christiana are not the only neglected kids living in the Casablanca trailer park. Bo Mestas is 19 years old. His sister Monique is 16. They were born to abusive criminal parents and grew up in a world of drugs and violence. They eventually turned to crystal meth as a means to escape the brutality around them.
Childhood photos of Bo and Monique are set in prison in Utah. They don't have Disneyland trips, there's no picnics. It's tatted pictures of your father in a prison setting on a bench with your mom. That's their vacations, that was their holidays.
Both of them come from a dysfunctional background. His father is in prison for 2 charges of murder, and the mother was a methamphetamine user and heroin user.
They had a horrific childhood. Father had been in prison. He was doing time for murder. On conjugal visits, he fathered both Bo and Monique.
Kids live what they learn. It's that simple.
When they were their parents being high, out of control, negative interaction with law enforcement, kids left unsupervised. Supervision entailed feeding the kids marijuana because Bo was a bit high-strung, and so his mom's way of parenting was to blow marijuana smoke into his face to calm him down.
You have a father that's missing and a mother that has issues, then there's going to be incomplete mental development.
Monique was raised in an environment of emotional neglect and sexual abuse.
Monique Mestas was the victim of a pattern of abuse. The boyfriends that were in and out of her mother Marilyn's life, an uncle and a paternal grandfather that were also alleged to have been sexually abusive or active with that little girl when she was a little girl.
For little Bo, there was no escape from his mother's affairs.
There was for sure physical abuse to Bo from men coming in and out of his mother's life as the father was in prison. There were anger management issues for Bo from maybe 2nd or 3rd grade. A teacher had written he was a good kid, but he had some serious anger issues and they needed to be dealt with.
Bo and Monique, as they grew up with improper role models, were in a sense ticking time bombs.
Bo and Monique have been smoking methamphetamine for 3 days straight. They finally run out and desperately need more.
They didn't have enough of a high, so they went out looking for more methamphetamine. They could go maybe get some more from Tammy Bergeron and Robert Schmidt.
Methamphetamine, the chemical composition of it, will certainly alter a developing brain. It will rewire the neurons.
It gives you euphoria. It's an escape for people that don't want to face reality.
Later that night, Bo and Monique head to the casino, where Tamara and her boyfriend are gambling.
Bo Mestas and Monique met up with Tammy Bergeron and bought $125 worth of methamphetamine.
Tamara tells Bo and Monique to come back to her in an hour to get their drugs.
He'd been smoking dope all day, and after he gave them the money and they said they could get the dope for him, and in an hour later, he's becoming enraged because he can't get his fix. He can't get his high on. The whole time, he's getting more enraged and more mad, and he needs that fix. He needs that high. He finally finds him at Casablanca. He goes, "Where's my I want my stuff, or I want my money."
But Tamara has already gambled away the money that Bo and Monique gave her. And without any drugs to sell, she decides to trick them.
When Tammy Bergeron sold him the dope, it was wrapped up in paper like a gram of what was supposed to be methamphetamine.
So they went out to ingest what they thought was methamphetamine, and all they got was a really bad burn.
Yo, stop!
They soon discovered that it was actually table salt.
And that was your fault!
It's supposed to be drugs, supposed to be meth.
You always do it! You always screw up!
All they got was table salt.
Bo and Monique are enraged that Tamara ripped them off. They rush back to the casino to find her and try to get their money back.
They found them, and they confronted them about selling them salt.
They wanted their $125 back. More than likely, Tammy and Robert had already spent that in the slot machines. It was a confrontation. Security guards came. They eventually kicked Bo and Monique out of the casino.
Tammy Bergeron was taunting Monique.
Tammy Bergeron committed the cardinal sin of escalating the disagreement rather than putting cool water on the fire. Drug recipients act out in an angry, aggressive way. I bought something, I gave you money, it was salt, it wasn't methamphetamine, now I want my money back, you're making fun of me, I'm going to show you.
So what are we gonna do now?
Humiliated, and with their meth high wearing off, Bo focuses on how to get even.
When Bo left, he's still enraged, he's still upset. You know, he wants to do some damage. He wants to hurt somebody.
These two individuals that have not been socialized correctly, and now they're in a situation where they believe they've been ripped off.
They went to Bo's girlfriend's house, Sabrina Bantam.
What's going on?
And asked for something sharp.
For what?
Right now.
Sabrina's father happened to be a butcher at one of the local casinos.
They appropriated 5 of his different working knives, chef knives.
Oh, that's perfect.
Somebody jacked.
Bo told her that somebody had jacked him and that he needed the knives to go back and deal with the situation.
That's good, that's good, that's good.
And he wanted to prove a point. Nobody rips off Bo Mestas for drugs ever again.
Hey, it's salt. They gave us salt.
Looking to get even for a drug deal gone wrong, 19-year-old Bo and 16-year-old Monique Mestas pick up butcher knives and plan revenge on Tamara Bergeron.
Bo realized he couldn't retaliate against Robert Smith and Tamara Bergeron. His upbringing and his mentality, he wanted to hurt them, and he wanted to hurt them bad.
It's almost like a gang mentality. Somebody rips you off, you go back and rip them off. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Bo and Monique sneak into the trailer park and approach Tamara's trailer. They're out for revenge.
Monique didn't know exactly what they were up to. She knew they were going to confront somebody with some knives. She only thought that they were going to go scare somebody.
Bo went up to the trailer.
Hello?
He knocked on the door.
Come on, I hear you inside.
Go away!
Somebody's at your door, you open it.
Brittany would not open it.
She's very streetwise. She looked after Christiana and was very concerned with their well-being.
He went back to the car, and he went back to get Monique.
The relationship between Bo and Monique, I think it was bizarre. I think that she respected and loved him and worshiped him. I think anything that Bo wanted from Monique, he could have gotten.
And him and Monique went to the trailer.
Hey, sweetie. You need to open the door, okay?
I can't open the door to strangers.
Please just open the door. Your mom's been hurt.
Brittany wouldn't answer the door. And then Monique said, "You need to open the door."
She's at the casino.
She told Brittany, Robert wants us to pick you and your sister up and take you to your mom.
They used a ruse to get into the trailer.
That's something that every parent tells their children not to buy into. But she opened the door.
Hey, sweetie. You want to put on your shoes?
Brittany told her that her sister was asleep and she'd have to wake her, and she went to get her shoes.
Atta girl.
And that's when Bo grabbed her.
Bo came behind her, held a knife to her neck, and said, "We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way."
He wanted to hurt those children so that he could hurt the parents.
The methamphetamine shuts down the frontal lobes in the brain's ability to make good decisions and solve problems.
Give her to me, give her to me.
Little Christiana woke up screaming.
The girl started screaming, and he wanted them to stop screaming.
And Bo lost it.
And at that point, the stabbing started. Monique started stabbing Brittany, and Bo started stabbing Christiana.
Keep it quiet.
Young Brittany, 10 years old, was trying to fight all the while. Bo stabbed Christiana once in the head, second time in the mouth, and stabbed her several other times, severing her jugular vein.
Brittany was a tough fighter.
She was stabbed 20 times.
Even the devil himself would have been more merciful to that little child.
She was paralyzed because her spine has been severed, and she's trying to get to her little sister.
Very disturbing scene, very disturbing circumstances.
Kissy.
After a long night of drinking and gambling, Tamara and her boyfriend stumble back to their trailer, unaware of the carnage inside.
When they found the kid stabbed at their trailer, they didn't have a phone. They had to report it. They went to the house phone, which rang to the Casablanca security.
101 Control, there's been a stabbing over in base 36 of the RV Park.
There were blood spattered on the walls and the ceiling throughout the trailer. The carpet was saturated with blood. Of Christiana, she had stab wounds and slash wounds all over her body.
I've looked at hundreds of crime scene photos, and those were the worst.
Brittany and Christiana are airlifted to a hospital where doctors attempt to save them.
Brittany put up a big fight to try to protect her little sister, Christiana. She was a strong little girl. She was so concerned about her little sister and not herself. And all she could tell me was Kissy. That was her nickname to her sister, was Kissy. Kissy. How's Kissy?
She didn't complain. So all she asked was, I need to know how my sister
Kissy?
is. Where's my sister? We didn't realize that the doctors hadn't told her that her sister had passed. Her reaction was a slow whine, almost like she was in pain, like too much pain, emotional and physical, to bear. And I'll never forget that sound. I don't know that she knows who I am. I don't know that she ever saw my face, but my heart went out to her at that time.
Fleeing from Nevada authorities, the Mestas siblings make a run for the outskirts of Utah. An all-points bulletin is called out, and police race off in pursuit. In retaliation for a drug deal gone wrong, 2 innocent little girls are viciously stabbed by Bo and Monique Mestas. 3-year-old Christiana Bergeron does not survive the attack.
Kissy.
Her 10-year-old sister Brittany clings to life. The killers make a run for Utah, with the police on their trail.
They kept talking the whole way about what they'd done, and they were planning how he was going to take the blame for doing all the stabbings himself, and that Monique didn't have nothing to do with it. While they were driving, Monique was apologizing to Bo. She couldn't kill the little girl faster.
Desperate to rid themselves of any evidence, they dispose of the knives and their bloody clothes on the roof of an abandoned gas station. 5 hours later, Utah police arrest Bo and Monique near Salt Lake City.
There was never any question about whether or not Bo Mestas did it. He told the judge he did it, he told the cops he did it, he's confessed 100 times to it.
Bo wanted to take responsibility for the murder himself. He insisted with detectives that he had done this alone and that Monique was not a participant in this murder.
Bo eventually admits to police that it was really Monique who stabbed Brittany.
I don't know who was the main instigator. I would suspect Bo just because he was older, and it was taking Monique under his wings and teaching her the evil ways of life. But I think she's just as cold and calloused and an evil person as he is, if not more so.
I've been prosecuting criminals for 25 years. I have seen the worst of the worst. Anybody who would hurt a child is depraved and is true evil.
I don't ever think that people don't have a choice. I mean, people have choices. Lots of people overcome bad childhoods and do real well in life. I don't think their destiny was to do bad things.
They have absolutely no remorse for what they did, no remorse whatsoever. During the interviews, it was a matter-of-fact type of interview, almost bragging.
The fact that Bo and Monique didn't show much remorse doesn't surprise me because that behavior is characteristic of individuals that have had difficulty adjusting to life because of their poor upbringing.
Don't they know that the only defining moment in their young lives is that they'll now be labeled child killers?
Bo Mestas, he was a calloused, cold-blooded monster. He had no remorse for what he'd done, and he felt like he was a superstar.
Bo Mestas is convicted of murder and given the death sentence. And his 16-year-old sister, Monique, is sentenced to 2 life terms.
He wrote a letter from the Utah facility in which he referred to the victims in the crime, little girls, as piggies. He had written those words in red.
Those are the 2 little girls that he changed their lives forever. He murdered one and changed Brittany's life forever, and he's referring to them as little piggies. I see a little body hanging eye level from a knife that's half her size that's in my bloody hand. I love horror movies, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but that was by far some of the most brutal I've ever seen. That's Bo Mestas.
Bo is among the 83 condemned souls on death row, Nevada. Monique will not be eligible for parole until she is 76 years old.
Brittany is now in a wheelchair, and it is my understanding that she's doing very well. But by all means, this poor girl never should have had to go through all the trauma that she did. I can't imagine what both of those girls went through and what went through Brittany's head when she saw her little sister being stabbed to death. But that is a scar that, in my opinion, will forever remain.
If anything good happened out of this tragedy, it was little Brittany had a second chance. She's an amazing child, the only survivor. The only survivor in this whole mess was her.
It was an incredibly horrific scene.
He was one of the most innocent, shy, sweet little kids that you can ever know.
We suffered and suffered and suffered looking for her.
These are cold-blooded killers. They wanted to see the suffering on this young man.
They smashed every bone in his face.
You really do come to believe that there's pure evil in the world.
Come on!
When kids kill, there are often no warning signs. Are some kids born as bad seeds, while others murder because of how they are raised? How can we recognize a normal kid from a cold-blooded killer? Lakewood is a small community in Jacksonville, Florida. The Clifton family lives here with their 2 daughters. The youngest of the girls, Maddie, is an outgoing 8-year-old.
Maddie was my tomboy. If it was something fun, she was going to do it.
She was the typical little 8-year-old girl who was adventurous. She had this Kool-Aid smile that just melted your heart, and everybody fell in love with her.
She was a real fun girl to be around. Most of our friends were guys.
They were the only girls practically in the neighborhood. It was filled with boys.
Maddie makes friends with a new boy in the neighborhood, Josh Phillips, who is 14 years old.
Josh seemed to have come from a fairly regular family, typical middle school kid.
He was one of the most innocent, shy, sweet little kids that you can ever know.
Come on, Maddie.
One November afternoon, Maddie goes over to Josh's house to play.
I was happy to see a nice young man come into the neighborhood. This is good. This is a nice young man who will be an asset to our neighborhood with our children.
There it is.
Just before it gets dark, Maddie's mom, Sheila, calls her 2 girls in for supper.
I poked my head out the door and I yelled, Jesse, Maddie, come on home. Dinner's ready.
The older daughter, Jessica, came in, but Maddie wasn't with her.
Jesse had come home, and I said, we need to go find her.
This is well after 5:30, 5:45.
She and I started trying to find Maddie just by going door to door to all of our neighbors. Nobody had seen Maddie.
Sheila decides to stop by the Phillips home.
I do remember going over and asking Mr. Phillips had he seen Maddie. He said no, he didn't even know who she was.
Can I talk to Josh?
Josh. And Josh showed up at the door. And I told him, I said, Maddie's missing, we can't find her. He said, let me grab a flashlight and I'll help look.
Josh Phillips and other neighbors search the community for Maddie.
I kept running through my mind, oh my God, what if somebody came through here, snatched her, and took her off?
She contacted the police. They began to search the neighborhood. They began to talk to neighbors.
And from that moment on, my nightmare began.
The entire community, including Maddie's best friends, join in the search for her.
Every memory is like me and my mom looking for her. You know, you go out into the forest and you hope you see like a little poke of red or something.
Immediately, suspicion of potential wrongdoing occurred.
Patrol exhausted all of their avenues. About 2 hours into their investigation, they then contacted the missing persons unit. We also made the decision to lock the neighborhood down. We had police officers on each corner. If someone had in fact taken Maddie, if they tried to move her, then we would be aware of it.
Over the next few days, hundreds of volunteers join in the search, passing out flyers with a photo of Maddie in the hope that someone will know where she is gone.
People came from everywhere.
There was a tremendous amount of media attention. Almost overnight, the story took on its own life. We have leads pouring in from all over Jacksonville, people that saw a little girl in an apartment complex or people that saw a little girl at a store that matched the description.
For the longest time, I thought, you know, she just got lost. She was just lost. It wasn't even a possibility in my mind that she was gone. It was always, when is she coming back? You know, what kind of story is she gonna have?
Nobody knew what was going on or where she was. And that was the only thing that we could figure was somebody had taken her.
Maddie, please come home. Mom and Daddy and Jesse are ready for you to come on home.
Police go door to door, asking people if they saw Maddie on the day she disappeared. They talk to Josh Phillips, Maddie's neighbor, and the boy she often plays with.
Two very seasoned detectives, they went and spoke with Josh Phillips. Josh gave a very reasonable explanation as to his timeline for that evening. He explained that he had seen Maddie as he was outside, and he had made a comment about her being down with the adult and the other children chipping golf balls.
Josh explains that he last saw Maddie at the home of Larry Grant, a single man who lives nearby with his mother. He tells police that Maddie went over to Larry's house about the same time she disappeared.
Maddie had been with a group of kids from the neighborhood.
He invited them to all come and hit golf balls using the fence as backstop.
Police investigate Larry Grant and uncover details about his past.
There were a lot of suspicious matters that caused them to focus on him.
We found that he had been arrested but not charged with having a 16-year-old in his home. He was accused of having sex with her. He allowed us to search his home, and in his home we found a book that had photographs of young girls in various provocative states. He spoke of Maddie in the past tense. He referred to her as his baby. He made the comment that he doesn't want to think of what happened to her, telling us that he thought she might be in a shallow grave.
Tell me again about your relationship with Maddie Clifton.
She was my best friend.
After detectives question Larry for 8 hours, he agrees to take a lie detector test.
Where is Maddie?
I don't know where she is.
And fails. 8-year-old Maddie Clifton is missing for a week. Police conduct the biggest search the area has ever seen. Maddie's friend Josh Phillips tells police that he last saw her with Larry Grant, an older neighbor with a suspicious past.
Tell me again about your relationship with Maddie Clifton.
She was my best friend.
Larry's odd behavior leads police to ask him to take a lie detector test. He fails.
Larry, you need to help us out. Where is Maddie?
I don't know where she is.
He failed a polygraph test.
I am telling you the truth. I don't know where she is.
But failing a lie detector test is not enough to charge Larry Grant. Police need physical evidence.
We never had the probable cause to arrest him. That's what we were trying to develop because of the suspicions that we were seeing. I think he may have enjoyed being in the limelight and pretty much playing us. This was obviously the most frustrating case I have ever handled in my career before then or even since then, because there were just no concrete leads, no solid evidence that led us to anything.
We were told that the houses all in the neighborhood had been basically searched. Dogs were called in. There were people calling on the phone and saying, oh, they've seen her, blah, blah, blah. Just all the people who just want to get in on the action, I guess.
Throughout this investigation, everybody's hoping for a happy ending. Of course, as time goes on, we begin to realize there's less and less a chance for a happy ending, which still everybody's hoping at some point we're going to find Maddie alive.
Hitting a dead end in their investigation, the police decide to search the neighborhood homes one more time.
It was almost as though Maddie had just vanished into thin air. So we kept going back and retracing our steps because we knew that in a majority of these types of cases, we've made contact or been aware of the suspect in the early parts of the investigation.
We had her picture everywhere, looking for her. We begged, we pleaded with whoever had her to please let her go. She was just a little girl. She still believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny.
Police go door to door to each of the neighborhood homes. They are permitted to search Maddie's friend Josh Phillips' house.
Josh's room was messy, typical teenager. He had a dog in the house. There was a bird cage in his room. The bird cage was messy.
Josh.
His mother said that she had been on to him about cleaning up his room.
In here, it stinks.
Police find no reason to be suspicious of Josh. Since Josh's room is cluttered and dirty, they're not concerned about the foul odor coming from his room.
Josh's explanation was that it was either animal discharge or something causing the smell, and he was doing everything he could to mask the smell, be it with chemicals and with incense.
The next morning, the smell in Josh's room is so bad that his mother decides to clean up the room herself.
I think that Mrs. Phillips was trying to find the source of the odor, trying to clean the room up a little bit.
In the past, the waterbed had leaked. She saw a small spot of liquid at the waterbed, and her first thought was that the bed was leaking again. Well, when she bent down, she saw the tape that was all over the bed, and again, thinking that this was something to try to hide the leak, etc., she started to pull this tape off, this vinyl tape that had basically sealed the side of the bed. And as she pulled that tape off, the boards separated a little bit.
When she looks inside the bed frame, Mrs. Phillips makes a horrifying discovery. Police desperately try to find 8-year-old Maddie Clifton. They search inside her neighbor Josh Phillips' home, but find nothing suspicious. Josh's mother cleans her son's dirty room and finds what looks like a leak in his waterbed.
She ultimately saw a sock as she reached in to pull the sock out, sees that it's actually Maddie's foot.
She then went outside and made contact with our police officers. She was visibly shaken. She was horrified. The detectives went into the house, and they found Maddie had been concealed underneath Josh's waterbed. But to actually find her in this condition, stuffed underneath a waterbed of a house that we had been to, this was beyond comprehension for the public and even for the police officers involved.
We were all very, very frustrated and surprised that the body had not been found earlier.
Had we even suspected him from the beginning, I think we would have solved this sooner.
Police officers immediately head to Josh's school to arrest him.
Detectives went to the school and took him into custody. The detectives relayed to me that he was fairly matter-of-fact about it. During the interview, he'd asked for something to drink, he'd asked for something to eat. He didn't want to hold his dad's hand. His dad was in there with him during the first part of the interview. He was cooperative. It took us some time for this to sink in, that this 14-year-old friend had killed his 8-year-old friend and had actually hidden the body in that fashion.
Her precious little body sat under that waterbed for 7 days while he slept in that room. You tell me, does a sane person do that?
That it is certainly an unusual case to have a 14-year-old who is accused of committing a crime without any apparent motive, without obvious signs of mental illness, and without a recorded background of previous problematic behaviors.
Josh tells police that it was a horrible accident. He explains to detectives what happened to Maddie.
During his interview, he claimed that his father asked him not to play with Maddie because he had been on restriction for not doing his chores. But he said that Maddie had come over and they decided to play baseball.
Come on, throw a strike. Come on.
And when it was his turn to hit the ball, he had hit the ball, it had hit her in the eye. She began screaming and he panicked.
According to Josh, there was no plan to kill Maddie or to harm Maddie until he accidentally injured her, and then everything escalated. Josh became very, very afraid of what he had done.
He was afraid that his father would get on to him because he had had Maddie over at the house when he wasn't supposed to.
Quiet, quiet.
If you hit somebody, you take them and you get help. He didn't do that.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
He says as he panicked, he tried to bring her into the house, first by dragging her, then by carrying her. And when he got her into the house, she was still crying and screaming, and he was concerned that his father would be coming home soon. And he was afraid that he would get in trouble with his father for having Maddie in the house. So he hit her with a baseball bat.
Josh claims that Maddie continued making noises and that all he wanted to do was make her stop.
He then stabbed her in the throat, neck area with his pocket knife and placed her underneath the waterbed.
Josh goes into the bathroom to wash off Maddie's blood, but Maddie is still making noises.
He heard Maddie moaning underneath the bed, and at that point he made the decision to pull her back out from under the bed, to stab her in the chest area until she stopped moaning, making sure that she was dead at this point.
Josh stuffs Maddie's body inside the bed frame and closes up the sides.
One of the things that really struck me when the crime scene was processed is on his nightstand was one of these flyers with Maddie's picture on it.
And for a week, we suffered and suffered and suffered looking for her. And he knew the whole time where she was.
The autopsy confirms that Maddie was beaten on the head, stabbed twice in the neck, and 9 times in the chest.
The autopsy results did indicate that when she was stabbed the second time, that she was still alive.
Josh's only explanation is that he killed Maddie because he was afraid his father would punish him for playing with her.
He claims that he was fearful of his father. He denied that his father had ever abused him, but he claims that the actions that he took on this tragic day were the result of him being fearful from his father.
Josh's explanation puzzles detectives, since there's no sign of abuse in the Phillips household. They look into Josh's motive and find disturbing files on his computer.
We seized the computer, and the computer experts went into the computer to determine what he had been viewing. And he had viewed violent pornography shortly before the crime.
Through decades and decades of debate and literature research, there's no clear association between viewing sexually violent, even child pornography, and necessarily acting out the violent fantasies. However, repeatedly viewing violent pornography is a means by which someone doesn't see them as a person, but more as an object for sexual gratification, and it can certainly contribute to the kind of thinking that can lead to violence.
He was viewing internet porn up to 30 minutes before he killed Maddie. Now you tell me what was on his mind.
Law enforcement can't prove that the files on Josh's computer have anything to do with the crime. But many still theorize that because Maddie's pants were off, Josh did have a sexual motive.
One question that came up from a lot of people is if there was any signs of sexual assault because her pants and her underpants were off of her. His claim is that as he was dragging her, those pants came off of her. It's another theory. There's no solid evidence to support that it was sexually motivated.
Maybe Josh killed for sexual reasons, or maybe he simply couldn't help it. A scan of Josh's brain reveals lesions on his frontal lobes that may provide an answer.
The defense used a psychiatrist who did find something in the x-rays.
A 14-year-old child has very poor planning, reasoning, judgment, because the frontal lobe of the brain, that part isn't developed. That could contribute to the type of crime. So in the case that somebody has frontal lobe lesions, this can certainly contribute to a panic situation, an anxiety situation, and reacting violently.
Our expert did not form the opinion that these lesions rose to the level that would have given Josh a defense. Regardless of the fact that he was young, everything about Josh and everything about the crime indicated that intellectually and from a brain function standpoint, he was functioning so as to be able to understand the repeated acts that he committed and the potential consequences.
Just 14 when he committed the crime, Josh is tried as an adult, so he receives an adult sentence.
Judge Arnold imposed the only sentence that was permissible, which was life with no possibility of parole.
The sentence to me was good, and I knew that he would be behind bars for the rest of his life for Maddie's death.
It's a weird circumstance to have a 14-year-old murderer. I can't say it's fair to have a life for a life, but it doesn't make me feel better.
You know, in retrospect, this is really a simple case. One neighbor killed another neighbor, but it's probably one of the most tragic cases I've ever handled because she was the example of young, middle-class America. She was everybody's little girl who played in the neighborhood.
In the years since the murder, Josh Phillips has grown up behind bars.
Everything we've heard is that Josh has been functioning very, very well, has developed intellectually from a maturity standpoint, and has been a model prisoner.
Josh Phillips killed my daughter, Maddie Clifton, when he was 14 years old and she was 8. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about her.
To this day, Josh still can't explain the reason why he suddenly lost control and took Maddie Clifton's life. Sometimes a tortured upbringing can drive a kid to kill, and sometimes kids snap for no apparent reason. What does it take for a good kid to escape the darkness that surrounds him? And what happens to the kids that can't escape? Fishtown is a tough Philadelphia neighborhood on the banks of the Delaware River. The town is plagued by poverty and crime, so it's hard for a kid to break free and excel in life.
Fishtown is in the eastern section of the city. There is crime in the neighborhood. You're going to have your burglaries, drugs, theft from autos, that kind of crime.
16-year-old Jason Sweeney has been accepted to Valley Forge Military Academy. He wants to leave Fishtown to become a Navy SEAL and see the world.
Jason was one of 2 children. He was the older of 2 siblings. He had a younger sister. Jason was a hardworking young man.
Jason Sweeney came from a nice family. He was working with his father in the construction business. Just seemed like a nice, all-around young man.
He was such a mama's boy. He was my best friend for years. Everyone loved him.
Jason was everything a big brother was supposed to be. He was my best friend in the whole world. I could tell him anything and he could tell me anything. He was the boy that whenever he found out somebody was picking on me at school, he was right there to be like, hey, that's my little sister.
I could go on and on about him, man. He was just fun to be around, okay, with the goofy stuff that he would do on jobs. But you know what? People that were 3 times his age would say, I want him to work with me today, because they knew what they were getting. They were getting a kid that was going to work and do exactly what he was told, and sometimes better than they did it.
So he decided he wanted to be a Navy SEAL. He started running. He was in karate. That way he figured when he went into the Navy, he would be like fully trained.
Jason begins spending time with a girl he has a crush on.
Justina Morley, she had only met Jason, I think Memorial Day. Justina was a 15-year-old who was in the Holy Name of Jesus Catholic school up in Fishtown. He had met her through his friend Eddie Baxter. Jason, he took a shining to her, he liked her, and was trying to strike up a romance. Jason, by all accounts, this would have been his first girlfriend.
In and out of trouble and left back more than once, Justina Morley is determined to finish 8th grade and get back on track.
He started telling me about Justina and how sweet and nice she was. She reminded him of me.
Jason, he was really excited about it. It was the first girl he ever talked about, other than just thinking the girl was pretty. He used to tell us all the time, she's good, and by hanging out with me, maybe she won't get into as much trouble because I don't get into trouble.
Jason saved money from his construction job with his dad so he can spend it on his new girlfriend, Justina.
He comes home, dusts himself off, jumps in the shower, he's gonna go on a date. And that Friday, she wanted to go down to the trails to have his first, sexual encounter with his first girlfriend.
The Trails is a wooded section not far from Fishtown that is close to the river. It's a bit secluded, so they like the privacy that it would afford them.
Jason and Justina think they're alone, but they hear footsteps coming up behind them. Jason Sweeney, a hardworking teen who plans on becoming a Navy SEAL, is on a date with his girlfriend, Justina Morley, when they're attacked. When Jason doesn't come home that night, his parents become worried.
And usually the first thing I do as soon as I walk in the house is yell, Jay-Bird, where are you? And there was no response. I must have called his cell phone like 1,000,000 times. At least that's what it felt like, because he was never late, never. And I called the cops.
Jason's parents file a missing persons report with the police. Justina is also missing. The next day, Philadelphia police are called to the trails, where officers make a gruesome discovery.
There was a report of a dead body in the 2400 block of Beach Street.
It was an incredibly horrific scene.
And the body was beaten so badly that it was unrecognizable.
This was one of the most gruesome scenes I witnessed as a homicide detective. The face was completely destroyed.
It was classified as an unknown white male.
We went to the medical examiner's office where we met with Dr. Ian Hood, and we informed him of the missing person report of Jason Sweeney, who seemed to fit the general description.
He'd clearly received multiple blows from a variety of weapons. There were many abrasions and lacerations that involved most of his face, forehead, and the right side of his head. I was unable to count them. The best I could say was there were at least 10 separate blows, but in reality there had to have been far more.
Detectives believe they found Jason's body and must inform his parents of their discovery.
We had to go to notify the parents, which is always the most difficult thing.
As soon as they came into my house, I knew that my son was dead. Just by the look on the officer's face. We identified him by his hand. He had gotten a cut a couple weeks prior to that at work. So the wound was still, you know, bright pink. That's how I knew it was my son. My work hired plastic surgeons that fix the dead so they can have an open coffin. And they said it would take them a year to put my son back together.
Me and Dawn had to go down there, okay? And I saw that they smashed every bone in his face, in his head. He had one bone left.
Jason's family give detectives information about Jason's friends in hope that they can provide some helpful information to find Jason's killer.
The Sweeneys provided for us a list of friends. On that list was Edward Batzig, Dominic Koya, Nikki Koya, and Justina Morley.
Police learned that Jason was out on a date with Justina Morley the night he was murdered.
We spoke with his sister, who indicated that she had last seen Jason Sweeney with Justina Morley on Friday.
I can remember just telling the detectives, I know he was with her. She knows what happened to him.
When we found the body of Jason Sweeney and had that body identified, and we began to look for Justina Morley because we knew she was with him, we couldn't find her right away. We were concerned that we didn't know what had happened to her also.
Two days after Jason Sweeney was found murdered, police find Justina Morley alive, but scared. They talk with her about what happened the day Jason was killed.
We were glad to find her alive, and bring her down to homicide to try to find out what happened. We were told by Jason's sister that Justina Morley was seen with Jason earlier on Friday night, and we started to question her, and we explained to her how serious the situation was, that we were dealing with a murder. She told us that she knew who killed Jason Sweeney.
Who exactly was there?
Eddie Batzig, Dominic Koya, and Nicholas Koya.
With Justina's cooperation, detectives locate Jason's friends and ask them to help with the investigation.
Edward, I'm Detective Reinhold. This is Detective Booker. Lieutenant Martin is in the other room monitoring this videotape. The best place to do an interview is at our headquarters. And if there's multiple people involved, we would like to have them all there. Just in case discrepancies occur, we could deal with it immediately by walking to the next room and then asking that person and trying to coincide what we're being told into maybe what happened.
Searching for clues to the murder, they look into the boys' backgrounds.
Dominic Koya was a 17-year-old. Younger brother, Nicholas, 16-year-old. The Koya brothers met Jason when he was, I think, 10 or 11. Eddie Batzig met Jason when they were in 7th grade. He was Jason Sweeney's best friend. Several years before he even met Eddie Batzig, the Koya brothers were spending time with Jason in his home with his family.
Nikki Koya and Dominic Koya were both involved with drugs. I knew they were involved with some petty crimes. It didn't seem like they had a lot of guidance in their lives. Dominic had some problems with his father. He had been asked to leave the home. The father was trying to hang on to Nikki and to give him the guidance that he thought he needed, but I think he had pretty much given up on Dominic at that time.
The Koya brothers, as well as Eddie Batzig, began to go down a road that was a lot different than what Jason's parents wanted. They were breaking into cars, stealing sunglasses, change, anything of value in the car, and they were going out and purchasing marijuana, heroin, or whatever drugs that was their drug of choice that particular day.
Detectives pressure the teens to tell him what really happened.
Who planned this murder?
Dominic and Edward and Nicholas came out with a hatchet, a brick, and a hammer and attacked us.
As Justina Morley was giving us this information, I take that information and I go back into the room with Edward Batzig.
The teens respond, cold and calculated.
So I know you've been lying to me. Do you want to tell me what happened?
Yeah. It seemed like he couldn't wait to tell me about his role.
I said I wanted to do it. I said I wanted to be the one to hit him first.
And no drugs involved?
Marijuana?
No, nothing.
Pills?
Nothing.
Sober as the proverbial judge, as it were.
Hey, so what happened?
We beat him to death.
I told Jason I wanted to have sex out by the river. I took him to the trails. We kissed. We started to undress.
Dominic Coya, Nikki Coya, and Eddie Batzig walked up. They saw Justina Morley with Jason Sweeney.
Jason was startled. What are you guys doing here?
Who struck Jason Sweeney first?
That was me with the hatchet.
What was the signal for the attack?
I counted.
That's when we surprised them.
1, 2, 3.
Did you intend to kill Jason Sweeney?
Yes.
Can you show me how you struck him?
Oh man, I don't want that.
He wanted it to be brutal.
Come on, Eddie!
What kind of weapons were used to kill Jason?
Hammer, a hatchet, and nature.
What do you mean nature?
Boulder, rock.
I had a hammer.
How close were you?
Like, just about this.
Right. Where did you hit him at? What part of his body?
Temple.
With the hammer? Okay.
About how many times did you hit him?
10, maybe 15.
Jason down on the ground, pleading.
What did Jason say?
He said, please stop. I'm bleeding.
And what did you do when he said that?
I had him down.
We just kept on beating him. Wanted him to shut up.
They were just cold-blooded. They just continued to bludgeon him with these weapons.
Did he attempt to flee and get away?
Yeah, once.
What happened when he tried to do that?
He was hit with a rock.
By who?
My brother.
He hit him as hard as he could. Jason was looking into their eyes and seeing that his friends were killing him. And he looked at Justina Morley and said,
"You set me up."
Jason Sweeney's friends are brought in for questioning and admit to the savage beating and murder of their supposed friend.
Come on, Eddie! Go!
As the teenagers tell detectives the graphic details of the crime, it comes to light that Jason's girlfriend Justina helped set up the murder. And her relationship with the other boys is far from innocent.
Justina was part of this plan, right?
Yes.
She knew exactly what was going on.
it was clear that Jason Sweeney had a crush on Justina. Each of the boys seemed like at some point were a little bit infatuated with Justina Morley. Now, you say she led him there?
Right.
Okay. How long had this been planned?
For a week or so.
She essentially used sex and sexuality to lure the victim to the place that Jason was killed.
Kill Jason Sweeney.
Nicky, with as much energy as and force as he could muster, crush the right side of Jason's head. After they were done, rolled him over.
They took his wallet, they took his money, and he took his gum.
Why would you take a dead person's chewing gum?
It's not like he was gonna use it.
How much money?
$500.
Did you spend all $500?
No, we divided it between the four of us.
How much did you get from it?
125.
Took his $500 pay that he worked hard for that week, and then covered in the blood, they had a group hug and cheered.
Why did you guys kill him?
I guess for money.
There was more to this than just wanting to take money from this young man. There was a lust for blood.
I never believed it was about the money. It was about the act of what they did.
What turned these kids into savage killers?
For these kids with these troubled backgrounds, Jason represented something that they wanted to destroy. The world is a hostile place, a kind of kill or be killed mentality, that you're either a winner or a loser.
They wanted to be up close and personal. They wanted to see the suffering on this young man. And when he cried and begged for his life, they just continued to bludgeon him with these weapons. Was it because he had a job and he was doing something that they weren't? Maybe he was making something of his life and they weren't.
The idea of envy and contempt for this decent kid, the literal destruction of his face, his identity, who he was as a person, the complete objectification and dehumanization of the person that they killed.
I understand where that comes from. They were jealous of him. I know people like that who didn't want anybody else to be successful. They all want you to stay down there with that.
He was such a lovely person. All he ever wanted to do was help other people. He was so sweet and so selfless.
Sometimes it's really hard for the innocent to see bad or evil coming.
Prosecutors need the cooperation of an eyewitness and must make a deal with one of the teens to testify against their friends.
Nicky Koya was 16 at the time, but looked like he was 12. With the evidence we had, there was a real possibility that jurors might find him guilty of something less than first-degree murder. We were absolutely convinced that if he were to ever leave that cell, him, Koya, and Batzik would do this again. We obviously had a choice. Did we want to deal with Dominic Koya, or did we want to deal with his best friend, Eddie Batzik? Or did we want to deal with Justina?
Although she didn't strike any blows as they did, she was equally culpable as having been part of the planning. She lured him there. She took no steps to try to stop them, and it was a horrific murder.
We thought that it was in the best interest of the case, that relatively speaking, Justina was the one that we would have to break bread with, that we would have to sit down and broker a deal with the devil.
In exchange for a lesser sentence, Justina agrees to testify against Eddie, Dominic, and Nicholas, her co-conspirators in Jason Sweeney's murder.
The Philadelphia jury looked at this evidence coldly, hardly, deliberated, and came back into the courtroom and looked the defendants in the eye and said, "You are guilty of murder in the first degree."
They were proud of themselves that they got 172 years each. Proud of themselves. Like, what kind of person would be proud of that?
Life in prison is suitable. They should never be allowed back into society because these are cold-blooded killers, and they will always be cold-blooded killers.
As a result of her testimony and working with the prosecution, Justina Morley avoids a life sentence.
17 and a half to 35 years. I wouldn't say that's easy. We needed somebody to testify for the Commonwealth in this particular case.
Justina Morley will be eligible for parole in the year 2020 and back on the street when she's nearly 50 years old.
The only time I saw that girl cry was when I took the stand at her sentencing, and I just said, just remember, I'll be at every parole hearing. Every single one of them.
While Jason's killers live the rest of their lives behind bars, his family tries to cope with their horrible loss.
I'll never have a niece or nephew. I'll never watch him get married. I'll never see the look on his face when he holds my first child.
I don't hate them anymore. I have no room for it.
They get to live in a nice 4x11, proud of themselves. I get to live with the nightmare of what they did.
Jason represented something they wanted to destroy. They actually did annihilate this kid who seemed to have enough love, enough money, enough security in his life.
You really do come to believe that there's pure evil in the world. And Justina is pure evil, as are Eddie Batzik, Dominic Koya, and Nicky Koya. Pure evil.
the people that knew him on the outside, oh, he was a great guy. He was nice. No one knew prior to it happening that they had this darkness inside him. It looked to me like he was lying in wait.
He really and truly believed that sex was his right and that that's what women were here for.
It was the way he was raised. He's a product of this environment.
911, what is the emergency?
When you hear the 911 call, it is blood-curdling. Nobody saw it coming.
Oh, man, just relax.
When kids kill, abuse, abandonment, and neglect are often triggers which lead kids to snap. What happens when there are no warning signs at all? What turns a seemingly good kid into a killer? On a December morning in Golden Gate Estates, Florida, a 14-year-old boy named Alex Crane makes a chilling and desperate phone call.
911, what is your name? Alex.
When you hear the 911 call, it is blood-curdling.
Alex, what's going on? My parents were shot. Your parents were shot?
We see it, we feel it, and it's horrific.
Try to call out to your mom. Mom! Answer me, Mom.
It shows us the epic tragedy that occurred here.
I love my parents. Hang in there, baby. Hang in there, okay?
Alex Crane's parents have been shot to death.
Mom!
The neighbors are stunned and completely at a loss to grasp how this brutal crime could have happened in a community like theirs.
Golden Gate Estates, it offers more of a family dynamic because there's an actual neighborhood. There's lots of other kids that live there. It offers more space for people. It offers privacy.
Rural road, with 1.5 to 5 acre lots on the street. I mean, I think they had woodlands on both sides of that residence.
Because the Crane home is secluded, neighbors know very little about the family's home life.
The Crane family was considered to be a really nice, community-oriented family.
They were quiet, kind of kept to themselves, hard-working people. They had a lot of close friends, but kept to themselves as far as their family was concerned.
Thomas and Kelly Crane, both very nurturing parents that really cared about their family and instilled good values.
They were really your average American family. The mother and father created a tight family unit. They worked hard. You would never know that anything was out of the ordinary with this family.
Alex, he went to Palmetto Ridge High School. Alex was not hanging out with the troubled kids. He was hanging out with the smarter kids, and he got all A's and B's in school. He was in JROTC. One of his brothers was in the Army, too, so I think they had an affinity for the military.
Alex loved what 14-year-old boys loved to do. He rode his bike, he played football, he socialized.
He looked like he just could have been on Nickelodeon, like he was just this sweet little blonde-haired kid.
But Alex's closest friends say there's a side of him that you never really get to know.
I think what makes this case difficult to understand is that there is few indicators that something is wrong.
There is some inkling that there may have been a darker side to him. There was a neighbor that came over one day and said, "Why is Alex so quiet? There seems like there's something going on there. You really need to look out for this one."
Alex tells his closest friends that he has issues with his parents.
Friends of Alex said that they thought that his parents were extremely over-strict. I had heard from other kids that I had spoken to that knew him that he wasn't supposed to have anyone over the house when his parents weren't there.
It was one of the idiosyncrasies of his father. Friends of Alex's were not encouraged to come over to his house. Alex's father was overly strict with not just Alex, but with Alex's 2 older brothers.
The 2 older boys were over 18 years old and out of the house. One of them was in the Army.
The brothers left the house, and Alex was there on his own because they felt the environment was too strict and controlling.
If there were emotional abuse that was building up over time, many families hide that kind of thing well, and they don't allow other people to see that it's occurring.
The father had told a neighbor, we have to keep an eye on him, and he was acting up a little bit around that time, being very rebellious and wanting to exert his independence.
From what the kids that I talked to told me that he had been grounded a lot.
Alex would be grounded, certain privileges taken away if he misbehaved.
If the relationship between parent and child is one of constant punishment, it could cause the child to have a feeling of emotional abuse.
While some people feel the Cranes are strict parents, no one believes they would ever lay a hand on Alex. But in 2008, Alex makes a 911 call.
There was an incident a few years before that Alex called 911 claiming that his father was hitting him, that his father was hurting him.
Alex had drank a soda when his father asked him not to.
If the parents were parenting in a punitive style, it could build up to higher levels of stress until the child felt it was unbearable.
After making the 911 call, Alex vanishes.
Alex ran away, was picked up by police officers while outside the home. The matter was investigated.
Now, you said there was an altercation at home?
An argument. Well, we had a little argument, but it was nothing.
There was no action taken. Alex's father was not arrested. That case was closed that evening.
The incident is the first clue that trouble is brewing inside the Crane home.
What's going on?
Around the same time, the Cranes suffer other problems.
The Crane family, like many Americans, were hit very hard by the downturn in the economy. Alex's father, he had his own business, screen enclosure. He was a hands-on laborer.
The economy kind of went bad, and they were struggling with money like every other small business owner at the time.
To raise some cash, Thomas decides to sell a hunting rifle.
The rifle was given to Tommy Crane by his father and had been in the family for many years.
So it was kind of like a family heirloom piece that they were keeping. The rifle was a Marlin lever action 30-30. That area, there's a lot of black bear, there's panthers. A lot of people have rifles like that just to kind of protect their homes from not so much even criminals, but the wildlife.
But since the rifle is a family treasure, Thomas changes his mind about selling it.
Alex's father decided not to sell the rifle.
The gun was something that they don't normally keep it in the house. It was brought inside because I think Thomas was cleaning it.
Kelly insists that Thomas hide the weapon, so Alex won't touch it.
Mrs. Crane didn't want the rifle in the house.
They kept it in the closet in their bedroom.
A couple of weeks later, neighbors hear some loud noises coming from the Crane house when Alex is home alone.
A neighbor had reported to Alex's parents that they had heard something that sounded like a gunshot.
We did come across a few neighbors that had recalled hearing 2 gunshots.
Thomas questions Alex about the blasts.
When Alex talked to his parents about it, he explained he was setting off firecrackers, and that was it.
2 weeks later, Alex cracks a strange joke to a friend at school.
Kids were making fun of him because every time they saw him, he was driving around in a car with his mom. One of his friends in school asked Alex, "Why are you always driving around in a car with your mom?" He responded, "Oh, it's so I can gain her trust and kill her later." He didn't seem serious about it. He joked and chuckled.
On December 8th, 2010, Alex misses his ROTC drill practice. Later, he shocks one of his classmates when he tells her that this is his last day at Palmetto Ridge High School.
Alex spoke to a classmate about not returning to school.
He had said that he was getting evicted, so he had to stay home to move. He had also mentioned to her that he was going to be changing schools.
Alex says he and his parents will be moving in with his grandmother, but this story is not true.
There was no financial issues, no issues at that time showing that the family was going to be evicted from their home.
The next morning, Alex doesn't show up for school.
Neighborhood kids, they didn't know where Alex was that day. The bus was so quiet. Normally he's on the bus in the back just talking loud, joking around, and he wasn't there.
Although Alex isn't on the school bus, he did not sleep in. He's at home and wide awake.
If the child feels that they are being emotionally abused, it could build up to higher levels of stress to the point where it becomes intolerable.
His parents, they were just getting ready for the day. Normal morning routine, brushing your teeth, fixing your hair.
The master bedroom shot off into a master bath. There was a walk-in closet. Didn't have doors on it. It actually had like a curtain rod and curtains hanging.
Thomas and Kelly have no idea that Alex has slipped into their bathroom closet.
That's where the gun was kept.
Alex, what are you doing? Alex!
Over the past 2 years, there have been warning signs that the relationship between Alex Crane and his parents has grown severely strained. Now the conflict has reached the breaking point. As the couple starts their morning routine, they are unaware that Alex is hiding in their bathroom closet, gripping a rifle.
Kelly Crane had come into the bathroom.
Alex had the rifle in his hand.
How terrified and sad must she have been?
Alex, what are you doing?
Seeing that her son was doing this and she's about to die.
Alex!
He shot her. Thomas Crane heard the shot, came running in, saw his wife.
After the first shot, Alex would have had to work the action on the rifle by moving the cocking lever down to eject the old round and to bring it back up to chamber a new cartridge.
Thomas Crane was down to tend to his wife. As he was bent over, he was shot.
His father was shot once, his mother was shot once.
Even in her last moments, Kelly Crane still trying to be his mother and trying to guide him and trying to help him.
Alex's mother told him to call 911, and he did.
What is your name?
Alex.
Alex, what's going on?
My parents were shot.
Where are they now?
In the bathroom.
When you hear the 911 call, it is blood-curdling. We see it, we feel it, and it's horrific.
Okay, who shot your parents?
I did.
You did?
When Alex called 911 around 8:30 in the morning, he was just crying and distraught.
I don't know why I did it.
Okay, try to call out to your mom.
Mom! Answer me, Mom.
He's in hysterics. He's losing it. And just broken completely.
How did this happen, sweetie?
I don't know.
You don't know?
First thing I was sleeping, the next thing I know, I had a gun in my hand, my pants on the ground. Oh, what did I do?
Alex immediately appeared to feel remorse about what happened.
I love my parents. No.
And stated that he didn't even remember what had happened.
Why?
Alex, sometimes things happen and we don't understand, okay?
We're left with wondering whether he was a psychopathic, criminal type of person who's just evil, or whether he's suffering from some kind of mental disorder, or maybe there was some kind of abuse.
Oh, what did I do?
Dispatch sent patrol deputies regarding a juvenile who was claiming that there was gunshots in his residence and that his parents were dead.
Can you go outside and wait for us?
Okay.
Is it really possible that Alex would not remember shooting his parents?
The brain has a way of blocking thoughts or memories. Traumatic events are one of those things that we just don't want to remember because it's just so very painful.
We're gonna get you some help, okay?
Please help my parents.
He was outside and couldn't understand why no one had gotten there to help his parents yet.
No, why aren't they coming?
You can hear him just becoming more and more panicked, and you can hear him saying, you know, why aren't you guys here yet? Where are you?
My parents aren't gonna make it.
I said, if he's outside, have him meet me by his mailbox with his hands visible.
So I see him.
He comes out just surrendering entirely to them.
Put down the phone. Put your hands up.
I explained to him for everyone's safety I was going to pat him down for weapons.
Deputies went in, they checked the residence. No one else was there. There was 2 deceased.
It looked like they had just dropped right where they were shot and had expired right there. There was more blood on her than I remember being near the father. I remember seeing some on the floor. She had quite a bit up around her upper chest area.
Kelly Crane had a single gunshot wound, went through and through into the back wall. Thomas Crane had a gunshot wound in the upper left shoulder that came out the lower right back. It looked to me he was lying in wait and ambushed his parents when they walked into the bathroom.
All it took was one shot, and unfortunately, each of them had died.
While sheriff's deputies are investigating the crime scene, Alex is locked inside a patrol car.
While he was sitting in the patrol car, there was a dash cam filming both front and rear of the cars.
In this cop car, his arms are cuffed behind him, and he's just hysterically crying. I mean, loud, wailing, talking to no one, just saying, I don't know what happened, I'm sorry, I love my mom and dad. And he realizes while he's in that car that there's no EMS there. The coroner's car is there, and his parents must be dead.
Alex was processing his parents very well may die, and they may have died at his hands.
While there's people standing around the car in earshot of him, he's crying hysterically, carrying on.
I love my parents. I love you.
As they walk away, he just turns it off. He just stops.
Is Alex in pain, or is he simply faking it? Alex Crane hides in his parents' closet and shoots them in cold blood. He calls 911 and admits to killing his parents, but doesn't remember how or why. Locked inside a police car, Alex screams and cries with remorse when officers are within earshot, but as soon as they walk away, he is strangely silent. Is this a kid in pain, or is Alex faking it?
As they walk away, he just turns it off. He just stops. And he's listening to the police radio, trying to read the screen of the computer that was in the car. As deputies walk closer to the car again, he starts wailing and crying and carrying on. I found it extremely disturbing that a kid that age could turn off the emotions on and off like that. It was like a switch.
On the one hand, we wonder whether he's being truly remorseful or if he is somehow putting on a show and wanting us to think that he's feeling sorry for it or making up that he doesn't remember what happened.
Alex is hauled into the sheriff's office for questioning.
We had him transported to my office where we have our interview rooms for him to be interviewed. I read him Miranda. He said he understood his rights. And when it came down to brass tacks asking him what happened, he says, "Don't I need a lawyer?" And I told him, I just read your rights. That's your right. And he kind of smirked at me and goes, "Yeah, I want a lawyer." When he told me that he wanted a lawyer, he seemed smug, like he was smarter than me. It was a switch that happened instantaneously. His whole demeanor changed from this young, vulnerable teen to a smirking, smug, wisecracking adult. It gave me a little bit of a chill.
Why would Alex Crane, a 14-year-old boy, no involvement with the law, with no violence in his background, kill both of his parents? Why did this happen at all?
The defense team has Alex evaluated by psychiatrists.
The doctors that we had evaluate Alex came to the conclusion that Alex was suffering from a mental defect. The morning he shot his parents, he was in a disassociative state, which means he didn't know what he was doing.
But the prosecution calls in another psychiatrist who finds that Alex has no serious mental health problems, meaning he did know what he was doing.
The majority of juveniles who kill their parents do so as a result of a long-standing emotional abuse where the stress builds up over time. Sometimes there's just a really bad argument and the child snaps. Alex felt that there was no other way out. That, combined with poor impulse control, could easily have caused him to make a rash decision, and the fact that there's a gun there causes that decision to be irreversible.
While some think Alex was a victim of abuse who turned on his abusers, Could it be that he was just a ruthless psychopath?
It seems very cold and calculated to me. From what I saw, he went in there with the 100% intent of killing his parents. All the people that knew him on the outside, oh, he was a great guy, he was nice. No one knew prior to it happening that they had this darkness inside of them. Some people are always like that from birth. You're Ted Bundys of the world.
Rather than go to trial and risk getting a life sentence, Alex accepts a plea deal. He is sentenced to 20 years in prison and will be 35 years old when he is set free.
He pled out and pled no contest, which is a plea of guilty, but not really saying I did it.
The ultimate sentence for Alex was 20 years and 10 years of probation.
Alex will serve 17 years of his sentence and walk out of that prison at 31 years old.
Everybody wants to know what caused a 14-year-old kid to walk into his parents' room, grab a shotgun, and just shoot them.
What's disturbing about Alex's case, nobody saw it coming.
Alex didn't show any signs of psychological problems. There was no history of other violence or other crime. He didn't seem to have some sort of deep-seated hatred towards people or an angry side.
The question of why this happened never really was answered, and very well may never be answered.
Despite the different opinions about what may have motivated Alex Crane to kill, the truth remains a dark mystery. What is the effect on kids who are raised in religious cults? And what happens when a kid is forced to leave the cult and cope with the outside world? Can this lost boy adapt and survive, or will he snap? Settled near the Zion Mountains, Colorado City, Arizona, is home to the secretive community of the FLDS Church.
The FLDS group is actually a split-off group from the Mormon Church.
Followers practice polygamy and obey strict religious rules such as no smoking, drinking, or even caffeine. Men have multiple wives, and as a result, lots of kids.
The FLDS is probably best known as a cult that believes in polygamy. The U.S. government said, we are not going to recognize you as a church. It's against the law in the United States to have more than one wife. But there was a group of these Mormons that basically said, no, that's not what we're founded on. We're going to leave. We're going to become the fundamentalists. And then they left Salt Lake City and they went down to this little area, Colorado City, Arizona, and that's where they kind of set up shop. Your government is all made up of the members of the church, your police force, everything is just part of FLDS. The town is frozen in time, but it's not like this little 50s, like, isn't this great, let's go down and have a malt. It's kind of something out of Twilight Zone. Women wear dresses down to their ankles, and they aren't allowed to wear makeup. They have to have long sleeves at all times.
The men of the church are pressed to have a minimum of 3 wives. These wives then become sister wives to this one male, and anything he asks of her or them, his wives, must be obeyed.
They are used to seeing the type of culture where the head of a household or the head of a church says to a woman or even a young girl underage, I want sex now.
If you are a male in the FLDS, and believe me, you're everything if you're a male in the FLDS, to kind of get the hierarchy in the FLDS, not only on this earth, but supposedly in the life after, is according to how many wives you have. But not only how many wives you have, but how many of those wives were virgins when you married them. The hardest part about the religion is the fact that they've got these children that are being married to these older men.
You have to abide by set rules, and there would not really have been a chance for children growing up there to spread their wings and try to develop their own sense of autonomy. Everything was just very regimented and very controlled. And so basically what that does to a person is it teaches them that they're worthless, that they need to follow the rules of other people, and that that's what they're in the world to do, is to follow the rules of other people.
The leader of the FLDS Church is Warren Steed Jeffs. a man followers consider a prophet. Warren Jeffs inherited the church leadership from his late father, Rulon Jeffs.
Warren, who was a high school teacher, becomes the leader. He becomes the prophet.
And subsequently, it has been reported that he immediately married his father's previous wives. Warren Jeffs had approximately 60 and 70 wives.
Warren Jeffs ruled with an iron fist. There was nobody equal to him, and Warren had the biggest compound. Warren had the most beautiful women, the youngest women.
Warren Jeffs did not allow televisions, did not allow radios, did not allow games.
He ruled. It was his place, and they all just loved him.
Young FLDS girls are trained by Warren Jeffs to resist interest in boys their age and to stay pure until they are married.
Warren Jeffs had a series of training tapes that all of the girls had to listen to and follow.
Ladies, you must concentrate on the bond of oneness. When you touch someone, the fire of the Spirit of God is felt by that person, by that child, by the thing you're handling.
In the tapes, he talked about obeying your father, obeying your elders, and how to dress, how to act, basically saying that you'll be married at a certain time and make sure you're a virgin.
Now reach that gift of protection called sweetness.
His favorite term, what's actually his mantra, was keep sweet. Keep sweet, and to make the prophet happy is a way of grooming, in some sense, the child for sexual acts.
When Warren starts marrying off some of these girls to his cronies, to his uncles, to his father's friends and stuff like that, he decides that we don't have enough girls here. So one of the things he starts doing is getting rid of the boys.
They wanted the girls to be pure. And if the teenage boy begins to socialize with the girls, then that reduces their purity. And therefore, they needed to be banished.
And the parents never asked any questions. They would do anything for this prophet. You have to understand, anything. They never questioned him. That's the scary part. Next thing they know, they're taking their kids in a car down the road and just dumping them off and saying, see you later.
My name is Parley Dudson. I'm 17 years old. I'm from Colorado City, Arizona. My father has 4 wives. I have 32 brothers and sisters now, I think.
Parley came from a very conservative family, an FLDS, polygamous family.
He has lived the FLDS life. And in that life, he has witnessed the subjugation of women, the power of men.
Parley was a threat inside the polygamous community, but a lot of the boys were too. But Parley probably more than others because he was very handsome.
I was like 4, I started to like girls. My parents didn't like out there, they don't let you pick your own girl. But I liked them since I was real small.
Parley Dudson's good looks and personality get him noticed by the girls of the FLDS and Warren Jeffs.
There's only so many girls to go around. What do? You get rid of the young boys. Get rid of the young boys. Guess what? The older men have the pick of the crop. Warren Jeffs did tell the parents, you have to get rid of him. We think it's time for you to tell your son bye-bye.
When I was 17 years old, my father told me to find somewhere else to live. My dad told me I'm like dead to him. They don't know me.
Parley was toast by that point. Parley's life was over.
Parley is not prepared to cope with the outside world.
My parents always taught me I was going to hell after I left. Like before they taught me if I left the Creek ever, I'd go to hell.
And with no one there to guide him, Parley's life takes an even darker turn. 17-year-old Parley Dudson is banished by Warren Jeffs and the FLDS community. He's forced to fend for himself and buys an illegal handgun for protection. He moves in with a group of teenagers in West Jordan, Utah, who have also been kicked out of the FLDS community by Warren Jeffs.
My dad told me I'm like dead to him. They don't know me.
Parley was toast by that point. Parley's life was over, and no questions asked. You just, because then you're next. You know, and then you're punished, and then your wives are taken away from you. You know, and that's the biggest fear, because your wives are taken away from you. Guess what? You don't have that place in heaven. You're going to hell.
My parents always taught me I was going to hell after I left. Like, before they taught me if I left the creek ever, I'd go to hell.
A lost boy is a teenager that's kicked out by Warren Jeffs from the sect. Parley Dudson was a lost boy. He was just recently kicked out of the compound. He was living with about 8 boys in this small apartment. They all think their lives are over because they've been told their whole lives that outside of the compound, if you kind of partake in any of that activity, you're going to hell.
They're told that if they go outside of the lifestyle that they're going to go to hell. There is the possibility of something that's called a self-fulfilling prophecy, which means that if this is going to happen to me anyway, then I might as well enjoy the fruits of it.
What the hell? I'm going to hell anyway. So I'm going to just do all the drugs, I'm going to be with as many women as possible, and I'm going to be bad.
The alcohol and the drugs are often a huge temptation for them, and so to help deal with this new change, they will often band together and seek out each other to help and support each other as they adjust to this new lifestyle.
Boys like the lost boys who have been expelled and told they have to leave the lifestyle would definitely be very susceptible to falling into all sorts of maladaptive behavior. They've not only been abandoned, but they've just been tossed away like garbage.
So they are lost souls. They are floating. So many of these children then turn to drugs and alcohol to fill that void.
Struggling after being rejected by his family, Parley finds hope when he meets Kara Hopkins. The two begin dating and fall in love.
Kara's 15 years old, blonde-haired, a very attractive young lady, very well liked by all of their friends.
He adored her, he loved her. It was the love of his life. Kara felt the same way about Parley, that Kara just adored him. There was nothing he could do wrong, and she was the happiest when she was with him.
Kara was probably the person that Parley loved most in this world. These were two young people who were really in love.
Kara's mom, Patty, adored Parley. She thought of him as her own son. She felt like he didn't have a family, and she welcomed him into her family. They were there for Sunday dinners. She felt he was good for her daughter.
But Parley can't escape his past. Haunted by the belief that he will go to hell, Parley gives into the Lost Boys' lifestyle of parties and drugs.
Like many of the Lost Boys, Parley also fell into excessive alcohol and drug use.
He met a drug dealer, Curtis, and that drug dealer sold him these mushrooms. Parley didn't have enough money. But Parley wanted the drugs. He took the drugs and said, I will pay you back later. Curtis basically said something to him like, you know what happens when you don't pay me back.
Yeah, I got you.
Parley returns to his apartment and parties with his friends and his girlfriend, Kara.
Hey, you don't need a drink anymore. You don't need a drink.
Parley had been consuming alcohol and smoking marijuana. And then he started to take mushrooms. And then later on, somebody at the party decided to make a cocktail with the mushroom juice, and they called it shroom juice.
Parley became incredibly paranoid after the majority of the drugs sort of hit his system. And he went into his bedroom and was very concerned that someone was coming to hurt he and his girlfriend and his friends.
Inside the bedroom, he revealed that he had a gun. Car lights hit the curtains and he went ballistic. At this point, he's just whacked out of his mind. And he kept saying something about Curtis. The drug dealer is coming to get me.
Who's coming to get me? Who's coming to get me? He was watching for lights out in the apartment complex, and if he saw any, of course, that meant to him that Curtis was coming to get them.
He went out into the living room and started really behaving badly with the gun and supposedly pointing it at everybody, just like a Wild West movie, kind of going all over the place.
Stop, just cut it out, man.
His behavior was so bad that people started leaving.
The one friend asked, what can we do to get you to calm down? And Parley just expressed in graphic detail that he needed to have sex with Kara.
Stop! Just stop!
she was like, no, everybody's here, we're not gonna have sex. And he cannot handle the rejection. And all of a sudden, that anger and the drugs just set him off. He pointed the gun at her.
Take your pants off!
Please put the gun down!
Former FLDS teen Parley Dudson parties with friends and consumes large amounts of alcohol, marijuana, and a tea made with hallucinogenic mushrooms. He demands sex from his girlfriend, Kara, but refuses his advances. Paranoid and hallucinating, Parley waves a gun around and points it at Kara.
Please put the gun down!
Parley was so completely out of it. When Kara falls, he doesn't even recognize that she is hurt. He tries to remove her pants, he removes his pants, and then he just sits there. And the friends all take off. Of course, they're very scared. When law enforcement came crashing through the apartment doors, he was simply sitting on the ground in his underwear and sort of chanting. And unfortunately, Parley is chanting some very, very offensive lyrics.
The officers talk graphically about Parley's chants being specific and graphic in nature about sexual acts. They quoted him as saying, "Die, I want to you until you're dead."
Parley had an assault rifle pointed directly at his head, and he didn't even flinch. Parley had no idea what was happening around him.
His bizarre behavior still continued even after he was taken into custody. They brought the patrol car up and they stood him up to put him in the patrol car. And while they were doing that, the hip thrust continued as if he was trying to have sex with the police car. Kara was treated by paramedics at the scene and flown by life flight to the hospital. Doctors there informed us that the wounds that she had suffered were not survivable. She was going to perish from these wounds, and ultimately she did later on Saturday night, just before midnight. It was disturbing to all the officers and the detectives that were involved to see the lack of reaction when he was told about having killed his girlfriend. And that's when he looked at me and admitted that for most of the morning I didn't know what was going on, but now I do. And as he said that, he even averted his eyes from me, and there was a pained look came across his face.
And when he realized he had killed the only girl he had ever loved, he didn't know what to do. He was devastated.
Parley is booked for first-degree murder and aggravated sexual assault.
There was never any debate that Parley had shot Kara. There was never any debate that there would be a consequence for that. The only thing that we asked the jury to do is recognize his level of intoxication. What we asked the jury to do is find him guilty of manslaughter.
Parley was charged with murder rather than manslaughter because it appeared clear that he was acting with intentionality, that he knew what he was doing.
The prosecution never tried to look at it from my side. It didn't seem like they felt like that I deserved the worst possible punishment. They conveniently skirted around the fact that I was on drugs, and that's the only reason that I flipped out that night is because of the drugs and my intoxication.
Marijuana, mushrooms, alcohol would not prompt you to pick up a gun and put it against anybody's head, never mind someone you love. That was fueled by rage.
There must have been something lurking deeper inside of Parley, that the gates that was holding that activity and that actions, those desires back, were released by intoxicants that he had consumed.
He's a product of his whole life. He's a product of this environment that we call the FLDS.
This young man grew up in an environment where somebody asks, they get. Somebody refuses, they're forced. I mean, that is his mentality. And when somebody challenged his bravado by saying, no, I'm not gonna have sex with you, that could have set off years of rage that he's had cooped up.
The culture that he grew up in, within the lifestyle, he really and truly believed that she did not have the right to tell him no, that sex was his right, and that that's what women were here for, was to fulfill the needs and desires of their men.
A woman does not disobey. And what happened that night was Kara disobeyed him, and that does not happen when you're a member of the FLDS.
After deliberating for only 5 hours, the jury finds Parley Dudson guilty of murder.
He received a sentence of 15 years to life. That's a mandatory sentence. Utah has indeterminate sentencing, which means that the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole determines his ultimate release. So the earliest he can be released is 15 years.
I never meant for it to happen, and spending this time here will pay for what I've done, and I'm willing to do it. I wish people could see that it was an accident, and I never meant for it to happen. That I love Kara, and she loved me, and I'd give my life to bring hers back, to make things right.
She was the love of his life, and he is devastated every day that he hurt her, that he took her life, and he misses her every day.
She was a very kind girl, very beautiful. It wasn't hard to fall in love with her. I don't remember why. I had no reason to take her life. This was an act, not that I wanted to commit, but that I committed because of my intoxication, to prove how bad drugs are.
It's not so much the drugs as much as it was the way he was raised. And that's where I point the finger.
I'm closer to my family than I've ever been. It's helped me become a better person. That's my greatest hope, is to go back with my family and people, but hopefully by the time I'm released, I'll be ready to go back and live with them.
Some twisted way, he may believe that he has in fact proved that the cult is the place to be, because when you go out into the world, bad things happen, and the only way back to redemption is to return to the FLDS.
This tragedy made him want to go back to the only life that he knew. When you are taught from the time you can walk until the time you're kicked out that this man is the prophet and that we are not to question, and that's the only life he knows. That's the only life he still knows. So of course he's going to head back there. In his mind now, that was freedom.
In 2011, Warren Jeffs is convicted of child rape and sentenced to life in prison. Parley Dudson is eligible for parole in 2024.